This video is going to cover quite a few relations, so let's just go ahead and jump in with a part. I'm going to go to the default part. Alright, so the one that was loaded with SolidWorks. And again, my screen resolution is a little bit lower to match the YouTube resolution. So if I right click and something disappears off the screen, I'll try to point that out. So the first point that we're actually looking at is the origin. And by definition, the origin is the intersection of the front, the top, and the right plane. So when I pick on that and we rotate around, that gives us our position in the 3D environment. Right, so heard a couple of the other videos that is now the center of the universe. Well, at least the 3D universe that we're working with. All right, so to get into the sketch, we just need to pick a plane. So front plane is what we'll usually start off with, and need to control 1. We'll go to the front plane, and we have the X and Y location, but I've mentioned before, and I will mention it again, that we don't really think in terms of X and Y so much as their relations, horizontal and vertical, because when we go to the back and that reverses, we're still pretty much horizontal vertical. When I go to the right, now we're looking at YZ, horizontal, vertical, and then to the top, X and Z, horizontal, vertical, and control 6 is the bottom. Control 7 goes to isometric, and we could be any one of those depending on what we selected. All right, so front, back, top, bottom, left, right, and I did that backwards. Front, back, left, right, top, bottom, isometric, and then number 8 normal too. Alright, so we'll get those straight. So when I pick a plane, front plane, and we open up a sketch, then in the options we've pretty much told it that we want this to go normal to that sketch when we open it up. It doesn't necessarily have to, but when we do the option settings later on, we can turn that off and it will stay in whatever visual orientation we started with. Alright, so my visual clue is we went from no origin, or by clicking on the origin that it showed up in blue or orange as the highlight. Now we have a set of arrows, and we're looking at a red origin. I know that I'm in the sketch because I have a confirmation corner. The reference triad is showing me the orientation, but mainly it's that red origin, and we'll always go back to the short leg is horizontal, the long leg is vertical. So what happens if I hold down the middle mouse button and rotate this around, it doesn't really matter what orientation I'm drawing in, what I'm looking at, I always have that to visually go back and look at vertical, horizontal. Alright, so we'll try that again. Control 1. Puts me back normal to the plane. My Y dimension, my X dimension, my vertical dimensions, my horizontal dimensions, those are the things that I'm really concerned with. Alright, so when I click out, the plane will disappear because those are all hidden. And if we wanted to see those, I can right click on one and click show, and then come back and click hide. As long as we're in this sketch, it's going to be in the front plane that we're sketching. So do be careful about the keyboard. If I just use the arrow keys, I'm rotating this now. Up arrow is rotating about the x-axis. I can bring that back. The left and right arrows are rotating about the y-axis, and whenever I get lost, I'm going to control 1. Alright, so that's my first point. And we don't do a lot with points, but I'll start with those as a relation because we do deal a lot with endpoints. So this point is showing me a blue inference line that says this should be horizontal. Well, by looking at the two icons, the pencil is showing me that I am sketching, that the lower left icon is showing me that I'm generating a point, and the right icon in white background is showing me that it is horizontal to the origin. When this comes up and goes vertical, now I'm seeing a vertical with a white background, and that indicates that while it may be vertical, I'm not going to get the inferred relation of vertical between those points. So one of my issues with points is that they orbit, and if we have the right combination of relations, I can put a dimension. We'll put a linear dimension. 3 inches is fine. And as long as I have the 3 inch without an additional relation, this is going to continue to orbit the other point. 2 individual points, one not the origin as a fixed, will orbit each other, orbiting the other point, the origin, or any other point that we decide to generate. So when we're dimensioning to points is not my first choice. And we'll go ahead and put that in. So when it comes, modify box comes up, I'm getting that dimension. All right, and so these are capable of moving in strange and unique ways depending on what I'm telling it to do, and as long as it doesn't violate the 3-2 on the dimensions, these are going to be able to do some strange kind of erratic things. Alright, so I'm going to leave the 1. We're just highlighting the point, hitting delete on the keyboard. If I come back, and here I am, nothing is selected. I am going to pick the point first. It really doesn't matter if I pick the origin or the point. Hold down the control button, select on the origin, wait for the little pop-up. If you move the mouse or it disappears too quick, we always have it over on the left with the property manager. And if I make this horizontal, then it's going to go to the nearest horizontal solution. I can undo, and if I tell it vertical, it's going to go to the nearest vertical solution. Alright, so probably 2015, I think it was, is when they added a sense to the dimensions. The dimensions are all absolute, so they will be positive. But if I go back and put a negative, that reverses the sense. We'll flip it to the other side, which is the same as the arrows reverse the sense of this dimension. And then the minus is there for a second, and then it's gone. So there's only a handful of commands in SOLIDWORKS that are going to actually accept negative dimensions and retain them. Alright, so let's see, what do I want to do? Let's go ahead and draw a line, and maybe we'll need another point. So if I just draw the line out in space, now I have those same 2 types of points, all right, that we just had. Basically 2 endpoints. And if one of those is allowed to rubber band, well, I can't really move it other than, let's see, oh, it did infer horizontal, so I didn't catch that. All right, so let's back up. I'm hitting Control Z. Since I moved it a couple times, it's going to have to go back through each of those moves. Alright, so let's put this at, alright, so that time I did not get a horizontal relation. And so now when I move the endpoint, it's able to rubber band and move throughout, and there's an inference that would be horizontal but not applied, horizontal but not implied, vertical but not implied, vertical but not implied. Alright, so by actually performing a vertical relation, okay, now it is actually applied, and I will get the little green boxes once I pick. Let's go through the by default under the I'm looking for the eyeball. All right, so we need to be careful of the show. If we click to the left, and this started in 2016, I believe, if you click on the left, then everything will go gray. All right, so when the eyeball is highlighted or showing reverse gray, then there's only a few things that will be shown. Clicking on it again, toggling that off, now makes everything visible. And in this case, we want to come down and view sketch relations. All right, so there is my vertical between the point and the origin. The dimension is technically a relation, and that was applied to the point. So now that this is the origin and the endpoint of the line are vertical, this is still able to move. On the endpoint, this is still able to move in a vertical fashion because we haven't quite locked it down. All right, and I hesitate to use lock and fixed in any kind of terms because they have other connotations, but we are preventing it from moving in a fashion other than what we have determined we need it to move in. All right, so getting rid of a relation, if I highlight the box, it shows me the two that are connected, or the two objects that this was applied to. And if I hit delete on the keyboard, those relations go away, and now this is able to move again. All right, so points, any 2 points can be vertical or horizontal, or have their various dimensions put on it, in which case I would need a horizontal and a vertical dimension to get this into position, such as put a point, and so that is my linear distance. All right, direct distance between the 2 points. Dragging in a downward fashion is going to give me a horizontal distance. And let's just round these up, 1.6. Coming back to the origin and the other endpoint. And then notice that we're going to be free to move. So I have to do that third click in this case. And once I place the dimension, now I can apply an actual number to it in the modify box, and that will update its location. All right, so that endpoint goes to black, just like this point was in black, because the combination of the vertical and the dimension says that that can't move without me actually making a decision telling it to do something. Remove the vertical and apply a different dimension, or change an existing dimension and let it update. So all I did was double click, type in 4, and when I accept that modify box, it shows me the new location as long as I'm in the sketch. All right, so as I drag this around, then I'm going to be able to move that point. All right, so to get rid of dimensions, highlight, hit delete on the keyboard, highlight, and hit delete on the keyboard. So points, endpoints, the origin, let's go into a circle command. And the circle object has 2 elements, the center point and the circumference. All right, so the center point is acting as the same as the end point of my line. So if I make that horizontal, now it can only move left to right, but cannot move up and down. So it has those same types of conditions in picking the geometry. So as a general rule for circles, we want to select an origin, and my first choice is going to be to use another relation called coincident, but I'm focusing mainly on the points and the dimensions at this time, so we'll stay with that. All right, so 5 inches, the center point goes to black. The circumference is still able to, and if we get it small enough to where we can't see it, it should still be there, but not anything functional. Maybe a blue dot that we can zoom in on or apply a dimension to get back to size. All right, so when I click on the circumference, tell it that it's 1 inch, it updates, and now the center point and the perimeter, the circumference of the circle is 1 inch. All right, if we did not have that vertical, just like we did previously, I highlight the, sorry, I said vertical, I meant horizontal. If we didn't have the horizontal relation, this would now be free to orbit at 5 inches. Alright, so one of the things with going to a center point, when I highlight this dimension, I get its property manager. And on the leaders, I'm only going to have 2018, they changed something. Alright, I didn't know it would do that. So our condition with the center point, min, and max, typically we would focus on picking the circumference of the circle, and looks like they have corrected that for me. So center is now you can pick either one. I want to say previous to 2018 though, 2017 and before, if you pick on the center point, you're not going to see, under leaders, you're not going to be able to see that end condition. You have to pick on the outside of the circle. So that being the case, I now have to adjust my my workflow and my process. All right, so points and endpoints come with some minor issues. So a point and a point, a point and a point, or just a point and a point are going to have horizontal and vertical relations. When it comes to the actual objects, then let's do a select of the line. So left mouse button, click, make sure I say that, and hold down the control button on the keyboard. In this case, I'm going to select the origin, and now I don't see a horizontal and vertical. I get a midpoint and I get a coincident, midpoint and coincident. The midpoint would be wherever this line is at the midpoint, and coincident would be that the line passes through that point but isn't really defined as a location as of yet. So let's do coincident first. So the line moves and updates and adjusts accordingly, and if I stretch that out, it's not really that it has to be at any particular location, and as it orbits, it's able to do some kind of strange things as we go. And just dragging it around, we will get a variety of results, flip-flops, inversions, whatever you want to call them. All right, so if I go back, let's undo. And again, I move that a couple times. I can see that the coincident is still there. I'm going to undo, Control Z one more time, so it goes back to its starting position. Select the line, Control select the origin, and go to midpoint. And now, regardless of the length of the line, that line is going to retain the midpoint until I put several more relations. Mainly, is it horizontal, vertical, which applies to the object, and then what is its length? Where is it located? Does it occupy some piece of geometry? All right, so for the center points, or the endpoint and the center point, right now those could be horizontal. There is also this thing called merge. And merge in and of itself does not produce a relation. It's very similar to left click, hold down and drag, and we'll see that this shows me the concentric, which we haven't done anything with, but the little yellow box. And I was talking about the white boxes earlier, so this is the yellow box that tells me that this is going to be inferred. It will be applied as a relation, but when I go back and select it, there's nothing there. So this is kind of an anomaly that those 2 points share the same location and are concentric, coincident, all of the above, but no relation is applied because they are just sharing that same point. So merge is kind of a weird one. So let's undo, Control Z, and so select the endpoint, Control select the center point. I come over and say merge, and it moved in a way based on my selection. So if I go back and watch that part of the video, then I want to say that I picked the endpoint first and the center point second, and the first is what it kept. or what the circle moved to. So we can kind of guess based on our selection sequence what items are going to move in what relation to other things, but a lot of time it's just hit and miss, and I'm really not paying attention to or concerned about the selection set. I'm looking for the result and I'm reacting to that result. Alright, so I don't really need to save. It's telling me that I have the 20 minutes and haven't saved the file. So now if I go back and tell it that this is horizontal, everything will go to black. Alright, so all of my objects, all of my endpoints, all of my center points, everything is in black, and on the status bar at the very bottom I will see that I am fully defined. That is kind of the end game of my sketch, is I would like to be fully defined. And what that means is nothing happens by accident. If this dimension goes away and I'm able to move, the line stretches. Notice this endpoint went to blue, the circle went to blue, as well as its center point, endpoint of the line. And as those are capable of moving, they can in effect move by several methods that may not be intentional, and we want intent. Alright, so to make sure that we have the intent, I can go back and let's look at the hierarchy of dimension selection. And I know I'm kind of jumping back and forth between these, but you're going to encounter these in kind of a random order, so I think that as you see them and work with them, you will put the concepts together. So I've been picking some endpoints and center points and locations. If I pick the object itself, just like we did with the circle, if I pick the object, then I'm going to get its whole distance. Right? If I go, let's Control Z and Control Z undo one more time. There's nothing really wrong with picking the two endpoints. I think it's more out of habit that it is easier, and in multiple selections it is going to be faster in the long run to pick on the object. And then my selection, I needed another object to work with, and since what I generated is an angle, all right, it's not parallel to the line. Watch what happens when I apply this dimension. Okay, as soon as I go between those two objects, the two lines, now I'm in an angular dimension, and that angular dimension, depending on where I place the angle, is going to have several different solutions. They should all add up to 360 degrees, depending on coming off the horizontal, coming all the way around from the angle to whatever we need. So in that situation, I'm just going to hit escape. It reverts back to the linear distance of the first object. I need to right click and select, or hit escape on the keyboard again, and either one of those will put me back into the selection mode, and now I can say that that line is horizontal. I could also Control select the other line and say that those are parallel. Horizontal and horizontal is the same as parallel. Sometimes there are reasons to pick parallel, especially when the line is neither horizontal or vertical, but we still want them to continue with whatever distance between them in any direction. So going back to that high school geometry definition of parallel. Alright, so if I make this horizontal, as long as both of these, my design intent says both of these objects, both of these lines are always going to continue in the same direction, equidistance apart, then I can set them to horizontal. If I think for a second that I'm going to change this from horizontal to 10 degrees, to 15 degrees, some other angle, but I still want this to be parallel, horizontal is not my best choice. Parallel is the better choice. So a lot of times what happens is you make your choice, you hope it's a good one, And if it's not, then later on you go back and fix it. All right, so when I pick between two objects that are not connected or otherwise can move independent, then I'm still in that range saying that this is parallel lines. So if I were to delete that horizontal, this is still going to act as if it's parallel because I placed a dimension that is forcing it to be equidistant along its entire length. It has to stay parallel. If I delete this, then this will be free to move in all directions again. As it is, I can move the endpoints. I can, we'll go back to kind of the beginning. I can select the two endpoints and say that those are vertical. And then the other endpoint is capable of moving back and forth across those two items. All right, so points, lines, objects, we have to contend with all of those. And I don't think that I'm going to be able to cover all of them. I need to refer to my list. What I want to do is give you a good introduction and good philosophies for strategies for working with these relations. So also notice that as we accumulate relations, this view sketch relations is starting to pull a lot of little green boxes, and at some point those will get annoying. They will start to take over the screen. They're kind of the gremlins of our sketch. So when I get tired of seeing those, I'm going to come back up to the view and turn off the view sketch relations. And now only the objects that I pick. So if I pick a line, I can see its two endpoints are vertical. It's at the midpoint. It has a horizontal relation, and still nothing really going on there other than I get that little box that kind of looks like it merged, it's coincident. And the only way to really get rid of that would be to split the line or trim the line or delete the line, and I don't really need to do that right now, so I'm not overly worried about it. Okay, so one more, and then we'll do some circles. All right, so select. Click on the endpoint with the left mouse button, Control select the origin, and when I do that I get the pop-up, and that can be vertical. Alright, so I need a couple more circles, and we're going to deal with equal, and that would have been a good one for equal. So I'm going to undo that real quick. And if I select and Control select my line, and watch out because parallel is at an angle, equal is horizontal. If I make those equal, this line will go to being fully defined, as well as the geometry. So if I make that modification from 5 inches to 10 inches, everything updates, everything is associative, parametric, so they will move in accordance with each other. And so this one was our vertical, and if I just pick on that endpoint, it's showing me only the relations applied to those two items, to those two elements. All right, so I have the object, I have its endpoint, and I want to call those elements, I'll try to stay consistent on my terminology, the endpoint element, and the line is the object between the two endpoint elements. So this one will technically be vertical as well, but it's by virtue of the equal, not by virtue that I made that those endpoints vertical as well. And that would have the same net result. So let's see what happens if I apply a vertical. Control select and vertical. Nothing really happened. It's not in violation of the rules. All right, vertical, parallel. They're still coexisting happily, and nothing is really creating any kind of conflict here. So in this case, I decide, well, I don't want these to be equal. So I highlight the equal, I hit delete. I don't recognize at the moment that this didn't turn back blue, and I say, I really need this line to be 11 inches. I apply a dimension, and I have my driven dimensions set to automatically apply, so I did not get the warning on this install of the machine. All right, so usually it would pop up and say, do you want to leave this dimension driving? Do you want this dimension to be driven? And in this case, this went to a driven dimension. I can tell because the extension line is darker over here, lighter over here. And when I go to change it, the dimension selected as a driven dimension, its value cannot be changed. So I'll have to go back in and find that that item in the options. But if yours comes up with a box and says, you know, the conflict, it should show you the yellow and red item can't be solved, item is in conflict, and then it lets you make the choice. Most of the time in that case it would just cancel, and since unless I need that dimension for some other reason, then I would go ahead and just cancel that and find another set of relations, or go back and double check the relations. Alright, so this was in conflict. It's not a dimension that I can use unless I go back to the vertical and hit delete. Well, this doesn't automatically change from a driven dimension to a driving dimension, so I need to right click and notice that it says under the dimension, driven is checked. And once I pick that, now my extension lines go from that light gray to the dark, to the black, and I have something that I can change. All right, but as long as those are in conflict, I'm not going to be able to generate the geometry. So let's go back and try to put a vertical. And so now I have a situation where I have item is unsolvable, item conflicts, the vertical is showing up in red. I've made a strategic error. And that error is that I cannot have all of these conditions satisfied at the same time. So the 11 has to give, or the vertical has to give, but one of them has to give. So Control Z, and we can put that back to where it was. All right, so if I were to highlight this, the other way to find the driven dimensions is to come over to Other, and we have Read Only and Driven. Be careful with the Read Only because it will do exactly what it says. If I leave it driving and Read Only, that will not be a dimension that you can change. All right, so we'll set it to Read Only. I'll come back and it says, nope, can't do it. All right, there's no real indication that that is a read-only, and there's only a handful of times where I would really even want to set that dimension read-only, but it is available. All right, so with the dimension still highlighted, I'm going to set it to driven, and notice the endpoint is in blue, so this is just returning a value now. And when I set my vertical this time, I do not have the conflict, the unsolvable relation, but the dimension does update to the 10 inch. All right, so let's create a couple circles, and we'll do some tangencies and concentrices and some other things. All right, so my hierarchy of objects, lines, circles, and then we'll get to some arcs. All right, so first object was the 1 inch. I'm going to Control select those 3, and so this was a select. Let me do that again. Select the item, hold down the Control button, select and select. And mainly I'm going for the perimeters and the circumference here because I can't apply an equal to the center points. So if I go back and say center point, center point, center point, there's no equal available. It says, yeah, the points are all infinitely small, single points in space, and have no dimensions, so yeah, they're already all the same size. So select, Control select my circumference, and set those to equal. Alright, so within the sketch, I'm going to point out a couple more. Alright, so since fixed is up there, we don't fix. Typically we don't fix. There are a few occasions where fixed will come in handy, but for the most part, please do not fix. It will create more headache than that's probably worth. Alright, so select and Control select. and we have this thing called coradial. Coradial will take this circle, put it exactly on top of this circle. They will share the same center point, and they will also share the same circumference. So it's not really for circles within the same sketch. If I had arc segments, which we'll do here in a minute, I could make the arc segments coradial, and that would treat them as if I had broken the circle somehow. All right, if we go to make tangent, tangent is going to allow these to touch at a single point. So they will orbit each other because we're back in that situation where the two center points, they're the same size, but the two center points can orbit each other. All right, but technically the circles are touching at exactly a single point, infinite number of points, equidistance from the center. They are touching at exactly one point in between the two circles. All right, so just like we did before, if I take one of the equals off, and notice that these two circles are equal to each other. And if I come back to this one, then this circle is equal to that circle. All right, so if I wanted to make one of these circles a different size, I don't want to delete this equal because I will also lose the 1 inch, and this is where we get into the logical conundrum of, well, which one of these do I pick? Well, I can always come back over and pick the one that I want stationary, or the one that I want to remain, and then this one becomes a 2 inch. Or I still didn't do that correctly because they both updated. Alright, so I missed the 1. Alright, so I can go back and set those to equal. I could also undo. Alright, the main thing is that I can manipulate these and end up with my geometry. Alright, so let's see, we're going to go with a select of the circumference and a select of the circumference of the smaller, and then these can be concentric. Now concentric says this circle shares the same center as this circle. Because this is tangent without a dimension, without several more additional relations, it can still orbit. Now notice that as I drag over, or as I'm moving that around, I'm getting little diamonds to pop up on the quadrants, and so at that location it's still not in an applied inference, but I'm getting the blue inference lines, and the diamond at the left quadrant at 180 degrees is going to be vertical, and the diamond at 90 degrees will be horizontal to the center of my circle. All right, so as those move around and I find those inference locations, and really it should only pick up both of those, I'm going to be able to allow that orbit and find a location. Alright, so let's see, there was another one. So I'm going to undo, and undo again, and how many times did I move this? Okay, not that many. Alright, so instead of concentric, if I were to pick the two center points, I would have the merge again. Alright, that has the same net effect. The problem here is that when I pick those, I'm really not seeing that concentric relation, and to remove that merge is probably going to be a little more difficult. So I would say, merges for endpoints, I don't know. I would stay with the concentricity because at least I'm going to be able to see that relation, and if I decide I don't need it later or I need to move it off center, I'm going to be able to pick those up and do what I need to do. Alright, so we're going to apply a couple more tangencies just for fun. Let's see, nope, not ready for those. We don't fix. We've already covered equal. Make curves equal length doesn't really apply, but that would pick up the circumference as a dimension if we needed an actual length of the circle. So I'm going to go with tangent, and then if I make, and that was a situation where I did not allow it to clear. Alright, so I had those two items selected, and in the process of selecting, I can either hit escape and clear those, or we can pick a different object and go back to the object we wanted to apply to and make tangent. All right, so now both of these will stay tangent and orbit at their single points from the distance, equidistance from the center of the circle. So no matter whatever I grab, the center points, the circle, I guess it does have to be the center point. The circles aren't going to cooperate in the same way. All right, and then we go to the line and a circle, and I tell it that it's tangent. Everything goes fully defined because this location touches this at a single point, which touches this at a single point, which touches this at a single point, and so on. And those cannot move without violating one of those relations. Okay, let's go into the archetypes. An archetype has tangent. Tangent requires an endpoint. So when I pick a point and drag, it's going to take kind of the direction that I drag, but if I don't like that solution, I have 8 possible solutions. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all I'm doing is going back to the center point, 6, or I'm sorry, the end point, 7, 8. And any of those are valid tangencies because of the say the extension, the projection of the verticals and the horizontals from that endpoint. All right, so tangent gives me that desired result. Now that is the same as a continuous arc in that I draw the line. My little yellow boxes are telling me that I am coincident to something. All right, so reading that little yellow box, notice that the circle on the right, its center point, is highlighted orange. And I have a coincident as the first element, or as the first relation in my yellow boxes. And then the second is that it's horizontal. All right, so that is a clue, if I pick up on it, that I'm going to get that relation. Coincident to the circle, there's my 2 points, and horizontal to the length. I come back. Now I didn't quite do that correctly, but let's go off of some other angle and I'll undo it later. And then when I go back to the center point, all right, if I just click and drag, I'm going to get the line. If I go back to the center point, then I'm automatically going to switch over to the arc. All right, so this is a good time to talk about Clickclick. So we have a couple more relations to do, but we also am going to come up to the selection. So I'm trying to cover all of these as I think of them. All right, one of the things I don't like is I really don't like to script these because this is a free-flowing process. And then as you're going through and you're seeing these different elements, you're going to encounter them again in different order. There's no set, do it this way every time and you'll get a desired result. You're going to start where you see the start. And that start may not be the same, but 1 in 10 times or 1 in 100 times. All right, so the 2 methods then, I am a click dragger, so click, hold down the left button and drag, and when you let go, you're pretty much through with that line segment, but you're still in the line command and you're ready to go back and pick up an inferred relation and start the next line command. So this is that continuous arc that before I let go of that line, if I come back to the start, I'm going to go right into a tangent arc and then right back into the line. So that can be a very quick workflow if I'm generating a lot of geometry. So the second method is, all right, the other method, whether it's your first or my second, is to click, let go of the left mouse button, click again, and then in this case I'm still in the line. It's asking me where I want the next line segment to, so I can keep going. And same thing, if I go back to the point, it will put me into the tangent and then come off. And the thing to be aware of is the resulting, all right, I'm 100%, okay, 99.9% sure that this line and this arc will always be tangent, just as I am pretty much sure that unless I infer, I get that yellow box with the tangency, that I will not be tangent coming off with all those other inferences. All right, so this time I'm seeing those light yellow lines. Those are also inferences, but they're picking up different things as I go. So that is an inference that makes coincident to the center of the circle, coincident to, or tangent to the circles. All right, if we come over just a little bit more, nope, not going to quite find those. Those are too close together. All right, so as different things come around, you're going to have all of those decisions to make. So that's why I kind of like it to stop in between. And then we come off tangent. I did not see a tangent come up there. So I'm going to right click, and on the right click, in chain is a double click or switch to arc. So if I come out here and double click, no, that wasn't quite the desired result. I think I had to do that before I hit the right mouse button. All right, so that one's showing me tangent. It shows up as tangent if that wasn't there. Then I would come back and check. That one shows up as tangent. Oh, and I got a perpendicular. So this is one of those instances where I was going through the process. It inferred a relation. I didn't catch it in the mix, and it went ahead and applied a perpendicular. Well, that's going to force that as this moves, or is capable of moving or rotating, that this will rotate 90 degrees with it as part of the process. All right, so there's a lot of things going on in the background, and that's why relations are so powerful, but also so confusing. All right, so if I want to get rid of that perpendicular as soon as I can identify it, we're going to make that perpendicular go away. All right, so let's see, I have a situation where these are staying tangent. Let's go to one that didn't go tangent. As far as the line, let's see. Let's come off of the arc, and there is a line. Okay, and that has just a little bit of swoop on it, which makes me think that I accidentally went back to the start, and I got a tangent arc. All right, so in that that one split second that I hovered over, it switched me back. All right, so one of the things that's going to happen is if I just draw a line and it's not tangent, you're going to kind of see this is a smooth transition, my pencil is staying connected, and then all of a sudden it does a turn. Well, to exaggerate it, it does a turn. All right, that little bit of a bump, that little bit of a hiccup in the line, the smooth transition, that is keeping me from being tangent. All right, so if I select, control select, and go back and force the tangency, now I'm going to have that smooth transition. The line's going to update and move in relation to the arc, to the circle, to the whatever, as we adjust and move those items. All right, so just like here where it's coming off, we haven't set an angle, but my pencil is taking a change in direction. Those lines aren't collinear. It doesn't make a 90 degree, so it's not perpendicular. We need some additional dimension or some additional item to cause this to go fully defined. All right, so I know I've thrown a lot out there. The ones I want to close with, we did the tangent arc. Center point arc is one of those fun ones that you click outside, and then you start to drag. If it doesn't go the right way, drag the other way until you get a desired result. Sometimes you'll have to drag it several times to get it to go the way you want. And then the last is the 3-point arc, and the 3-point arc requires that we give it a start point, an end point, and then we approximate what we want it to look like. So this is handy if we want to really flat. We don't have anything to go tangent to. We didn't have an end point to start with. And the desired result doesn't really have a dimension yet or any of that geometry. Alright, so that brings up, let's do co-radial and then we'll talk about the parameters. Alright, so those two arcs I would like to be co-radial, and even though this is very flat and this one's got quite a bit of curvature to it, when I select, hold down the control button and select, I can go co-radial. Notice it shrinks, and that if I was to drag to the endpoints, I don't really want to connect those because I believe they will go back to being a circle if I connect them. I just wanted to zoom up on it, that these are now sharing the same diameter, same radius, so same center point, and are in effect a broken circle. If I connect that endpoint, and I connect that endpoint, it's going to act like a circle, and in certain cases I think it actually goes back to being a circle. But apparently not this one. Okay, so some things to be aware of. Alright, so let's talk about the parameters, and we'll close on this note since I'm not sticking very well to my 10-minute videos. We click, and then I notice that I have some parameters over here. So I'm going to end the chain. Let's see, this is out of my standard workflow, so I click on the chain and I say, oh, there's some parameters over here. This is 2.5 inches, okay, 25 inches long, 2.5 inches long, and at 30 degrees. Well, that's a good start. Well, no, it can't be 30 degrees because the inference already put in horizontal. That overrides, and then this is grayed out. 0 degrees or 180 degrees, but not anything else. Alright, so those parameters, notice, did not get my object or my two endpoint elements to be fully defined. Only the relations are going to have that effect. Alright, so probably one of the worst things that you can do is fill these items out, x location, y location for an endpoint. I want it to start at -1 inch. Alright, so -1 inch. And so here's one of those places where we can use the negatives by -2 inches. And then please do not do this. This is not a strategy that is, I have received projects where these items were put in at their parameters and then fixed. To modify this is the utmost painful situation that you can generate. I don't know how else to put it, but don't do it. Alright, so -4. And what you'll end up getting is, if I fix those two endpoints, yep, sure enough, they are defined, but I can't put a dimension on it. I can't put any additional relations. If I were to get rid of the horizontal, it's still going to be fully defined. All right. The other downside to a fixed line, let's just put one here, and I click on fixed. Notice that I had the object. My two endpoints are still movable. All right, where previously I picked the endpoints to be fixed, and the line would stay in black because that is the definition of the line between the 2 points. In this case, the line is still capable of moving, or the endpoints are still capable of moving even though the line is in location. So my advice is to just close up the parameters, forget they're there for now. They do have some good information, and they will return values to you that are good to know. But as far as fixing things, don't fix. All right, like I said earlier on, there are a couple of times where it is appropriate to fix something, but it is usually a temporary solution. All right, so let's go back and look at the sum total of the sketch. So display delete relations. Be careful with anytime you see delete all, it says exactly what it means. All of these relations are going to go away. So horizontal 0, these are incrementing values. And so something like vertical 0 to vertical 5, well, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are things in my example that I deleted, and it kept incrementing the values. It's not going to go back and fill those ins, and I really don't care. Coradial 29, not sure how it got there, but okay. Tangency, tangency, tangency. Well, since tangent 28, and then that kind of makes sense that maybe we were going 0, 5, no. Well, there's a 3, 4. I don't even want to figure that out. I don't care about those numbers. And then we come to fixed 6 and 7. All right, so I deleted the fixed off the line. That's why there's not an additional fixed. Notice that we have the distance and diameters, dimensions that are showing up as relations. And then distance 19 is that driven dimension on the 10 inch. So even here it's showing up as an item. All right, so if I need any one of those to go away, I can select and hit delete, or I can hold down the control button, or I can hold down the shift button and select a group. All right, so shift or control select, and then there is shift select, but I want to stay with the control select. I can right click on those and say delete. And as I mentioned, be careful with delete all, because everything in your sketch will disappear. All the relations will disappear. All the objects will still be there, but dimensions, horizontal, verticals, all gone. So undo, last change, get back what we need, and well, have fun with relations, because this is something that you're going to do in every sketch and every part that you make. Getting a good handle on, I call it the poker of setting up, fully defining a sketch, is that I can have, back to the very beginning, I can have a horizontal and a dimension that is the same as a coincident, and a dimension which is the same as, all of those are just based on the selection. So did I pick 2 points? Did I pick a point at a line? Did I pick 2 lines? All of those are driving my decisions, and as you become more comfortable with relations, it will get easier.